Hello, everybody, and welcome to the High Return Real Estate Show, the show for heavy hitters. And I have got one of my favorite heavy hitters on, my business partner, Mr. Jack Gibson. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, Shaq, you're doing great today. Excited about this podcast.
Yeah, I am so jazzed for this one because these are people that we work with. We recently started working with, and it's just been an absolutely fantastic experience. And this is part two of an episode that we did a few days ago, basically highlighting how you can have high tech and high touch working to your advantage in the property management industry. And the two people that we're going to talk to today are really helping to completely disrupt what's happening in the property management business, which in my opinion has been ripe for disruption for a very, very long time. So stay tuned because we've got a really, really great show for you.
Welcome to the High Return Real Estate Show, the podcast for heavy hitters. Two men, one mission. It's time to build your empire.
All right, welcome back. Today we have both Justin and Barbie from Great Jones Property Management. Welcome to both of you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. So Justin, I'm going to pick on you first. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and what your background is and what you saw when you took the opportunity with Great Jones?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Justin Hoffman. I've been with Great Jones for almost a year now. I helped launch the North Carolina market and now the Texas market. So I do kind of the regional operation role for 4 separate markets between those 2 states. And before this, I actually helped expand and franchise through a company called Orange Theory Fitness. And so I helped expand the Florida market, the Ohio market, the California market with those guys, oversaw the opening of about 90 different stores with them. And since then, that was about 8 years of just constantly moving up that ladder. And since then, I've recently gotten into real estate and now I saw Great Jones, that same sort of infant stage and watching something grow and blossom into, I like the way you put it, something very disruptive, which what I did with the fitness industry and now with the real estate industry.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. And Barbie, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I've been in the real estate market 13 years now. I started in the multifamily side of the business and later moved into the REITs, the institutional owner side. So prior to Great Jones, I was a part of the Waypoint Homes team and the Invitation Homes. And then one of the co-founders here, Dave Diaz, friend of mine, as well as partner at Waypoint and some other team members, we've all worked together and came over to Great Jones. I have been here almost 2 years now. In April, actually, will be 2 years.
And what's your primary function?
I'm an account manager. So I work with a lot of different accounts in all of our markets.
Cool. Okay. And you're doing a great job on our account. So we love that. So I want to get into this. So last week when we had Nicola on and Christopher, we definitely took kind of a more high level view of, what's happening in terms of the way that the company was formed and what they were doing in terms of disruption. And I want to encourage every listener that's listening to this to go back and listen to part 1 first, because it'll give you a much better framework for what we're going to talk about today. But today is really more about how does that play out in terms of operational, day-to-day, boots on the ground. Most importantly, how do investors benefit by this different way of doing things in the property management industry? So I want to ask some really, really specific questions. Let's just start like right at the beginning. So what is, when a new investor comes to you guys or gals, I'm not trying to be sexist, what does the onboarding process look like? How does that happen?
Yeah, so Barbie, I can go into this a little bit. We have, and you'll notice a pattern as we go through some of the operational items that we're going to talk about today, that we try to specialize as much as possible. We don't want one person trying to do 100 different jobs. We want one person doing one job really, really well. And that starts with the onboarding process as well, because we have a team that only does this job. And so they're collecting information, they're inputting information, they're reaching out to prior property managers, they're getting all of that stuff together for the owner, and all the heavy lifting that is required from that, we have people that just do that all day long. From an owner standpoint, it's as simple as filling out an online form. I mean, it's basic information, your W-9, your banking preferences for your individual properties. You're also assigning, certain preferences on leasing, if you like dogs, if you are, particular to any sort of things that you want to put into that. You have that ability to make those decisions as the owner, and then it's just clicking the submit button. And then from there, once that onboarding form has been submitted, you're going to reach out to your local team as well. So the owner is going to get that touch with who's actually going to be in your home, in your property, and taking care of that stuff as well. If it's a vacant property, very next step after you've submitted the online form, you've had a conversation with your property manager, we get somebody in, usually within the first couple of days of that transaction, to actually inspect the unit as well. And yeah, we go head to toe. It's almost like you're getting an appraisal for your home with that inspection. But yeah, very simple. We try to keep it as cut and dry as possible, no weird things going on. And it's just from the get-go, we just kind of take it, pick it up, and run with it.
Yeah, it's nice. And I've been through that wizard, and it's super easy to use. And I know that you guys also will take phone calls in that regard too. Like if you have an investor that's just not super high tech and they don't want to fill out the form online, they can just speak to a live person and somebody who, like you say, does that all day long. And Jack, I know you and I have, I guess, maybe a little bit felt the pain of how awesome that inspection is when they send somebody in,
right.
Because, we've been rehabbing properties, and we rehab to a really, really high standard. And then we're now, grateful, obviously, but it's been challenging for us to move in a situation where we now have an extra set of benchmarks for our properties as they're coming off of rehab to meet your standards. Because I think one of the things that's really great about you is that you say, look, we want these properties to be in really, really fantastic condition, and every door needs to operate a certain way. Every closet has to function correctly. Like, it's all that little stuff that's really easy to overlook, but it creates an experience for the would-be tenant when they go in and view the property that just makes the property easier to rent.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we're, for us, it's been like a double-edged sword, right? It's like, wow, what a pain in the ass to get this property to your conditions, but what a blessing it is on the backside to have it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great. So I want to ask Barbie really then, so that happens. Now the property starts getting marketed. Can you speak to a little bit about how things are marketed? And because I love your whole, rent analysis and dropping in price, and you guys do some really, really cool stuff that helps, that just nobody else is doing, that gets renters into these properties, and also the way that you show properties. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So our leasing and rental cycle is, industry standard right now is we in particular use a product called Rent Lead. So it's a shelf showing, sophisticated lockbox feature that allows us to not only screen the tenant ahead of time before allowing entry, but it also just allows flexibility for the prospect to schedule around their own timing and what's convenient for them to actually go view the home, instead of having, a strict schedule and trying to match up with a leasing consultant. Which works really well. And so, we have safety features and backup around that. We also have a call center team where they, all the calls are called in and filtered so that we get qualified tenants, move those through the process so we don't miss a call. And then those qualified tenants get plugged into our direct leasing agents, which will then, follow a prospect through the application process and credit and background checks and the financial aspect of it, and all of just the questions that they have about the company and the home in general, and walks them through that phase. And then once all of that moves to the next step is when we have what we call a FOM, which is a field operations manager that works in that area, that will meet the prospect at the home the day of move-in. turn in the keys and do a real thorough, what we call move-in inspection. So not only is that just to determine the condition of the home, but also to educate the new tenant to their home. Show them where the main water shutoff valve is in the event of an emergency, how to properly change your AC filter, how to, if your garbage disposal is clogged, how to, kind of troubleshooting those types of things. All of those main points of contact, if they have a pool, just to make them familiar with it. We want them to, not only feel like welcome to your new home, but also take pride and responsibility in that home as well. So that educational process is, I feel, very unique as well as very critical to the process. And then it just explains, also explains to them how to get a hold of us, how to contact us in the event of, maintenance and all other aspects of that side.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. What I was going to ask is, have you found then that educational piece, when they understand, like how to change filters or potentially troubleshoot a garbage disposer, things like that, statistically, is that now reducing the number of calls you get for maintenance?
For sure. I mean, that process explains to them the expectations that we have around maintenance, right? And that is that, the owner is in charge for the major, and the tenant and the resident should be in charge for the basics. And the basics being, if you have a clog, try to troubleshoot it. If your AC isn't working, have you changed the filter? Is it set on the right settings? Is the drain line clogged? Little easy things like that they can troubleshoot, that can save on a dispatch and also save on cost. So it's super important. It's very valuable to the tenant. I don't think they see that on day one, because on moving day you just want to get to moving, but later they understand the value of that. And it also allows us to have a good understanding of the home and where these items are located, what type of air conditioning they have, what type of appliances they have, if they're in gas, if they're not on gas, so that we can troubleshoot on our end as well when those maintenance calls come in.
Yeah. Has that always been part of Great Jones' process from the beginning? Is the meeting them at the property?
Yes.
For the walkthrough? Okay. Yeah. Do you have any? Is there any statistics on how much that drops maintenance calls or keeps the tenant in place, or we just know it has a measurable fact? We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say we have any statistics, and I don't think that it's going to deter or keep the calls down. I think it's just a human nature thing that when you don't own something, to feel like when something goes wrong, you immediately have to call someone for help. And then, so that happens regardless. But when they get to us, our service team has the ability to say, okay, I have a good picture of what the house looks like, what kind of appliances we have, what we're working with. And we're able to walk them, calm them down first and walk them through, did you try this? Let's try that. Most of the time, those little things can get resolved on a call. And then if they don't, then that's when we pursue the dispatch. But they are important. I don't think that there's a statistical background to it. It's just that extra step, educating them, and just getting them more familiar with the home at the front end.
So I want to ask, just challenge you a little bit, because as we sort of presented this information, there are listeners out there going like, okay, wait a minute. You're sending in someone to look at a property by themselves with a Rently lockbox, and you're doing some sort of pre-qualification, obviously, to do that. But I was a little bit unclear of how much of the tenant screening process happens prior to allowing them to go in. So what's going on there in terms of, protection of the property and making sure we're not sending a deadbeat in there or something like that?
Yeah, so I'll go into that a little bit as well. I mean, there's some qualification just from a financial standpoint. You have to have an authorized credit card. There's a small charge that's actually placed on your card, kind of like a holding fee. So you can't go view a property without at least some skin in the game, because now we have your credit card information. And if something were to happen, and knock on wood, this doesn't happen or hasn't happened yet, at least in my markets, there is insurance as well through Rently. And so they cover any sort of big expensive items that might happen. If somebody goes and turns on the water and floods the whole house, they're going to cover that cost. But yeah, there is some pre-qualification just from basic information as well.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So I guess I sort of initially kind of disliked the whole, not having a human body there to show them the property, but I've come to understand the benefits of it. And when you talk about the field manager meeting them to show them, operationally how the home works, like they're still getting the high touch there, which is really, really nice. So let's talk now more about, sort of the thing that all investors hate is problem tenants. So, I mean, you can still have, the greatest processes in the world, but it doesn't mean that we're ever going to completely control human behavior. And so tell us a little bit about how you handle, late fees, how long do those go before you move towards eviction, things like that. I know you guys have this unbelievable stats about evictions, and I want you to talk about that stuff too.
Yeah, so I'll start with late fees and then just kind of work through the process step by step. But again, going back to the whole specialized, we have one person who just specializes in posting late fees and basically tracking delinquency. We have somebody that's just in charge of evictions. And so this kind of goes back into that funnel of, when a certain box gets checked, it goes into somebody's workflow. And that's sort of the mixture between, how you said it earlier, the technology kind of meets the personal touch, and you have a person, working through those processes as things happen. Now, the rules are a little bit different in each market. And I know that, North Carolina, regulations with late fees are different than Texas, they're different than Indianapolis. But just in general, we usually charge about $100 for a late fee. It goes out on the 5th, or it gets posted on the 5th, and it hits the account on the 9th or the 8th. Usually takes about 3 days. Now in North Carolina, we can only charge up to 5% of the rent. So that might not equal $100, but we just sort of, play by the rules in each market as we need to. Once the late fee has been posted, and again, it changes by market. Once we get to about the 9th or 10th is when we can start having that conversation about eviction with the owner. Now, North Carolina, there needs to be 10 days between the notice of eviction and actually filing the eviction. So in that case, we're looking at closer to the 20th before we can actually start taking action. But the owner's in communication with the property manager, that the whole situation, if they want to set up some sort of payment plan with the tenant, all that stuff is, trying to make it work. We don't want to just on the 10th of every month send, hundreds of people into eviction. We want to try to keep that tenant there as long as possible. But yeah, we have through each market different agencies that we go through. I know in North Carolina we use Nationwide Eviction. Cost is very low for them. We're talking from the beginning to the end, a $300 eviction total for North Carolina. Very simple. Everything's online, yeah, it's just like I said, going from point A to point B to point C. Somebody's working on all those workflows as we go.
But you also have some incredible stats in terms of eviction rate when you guys place the tenant. Yeah. So I want you to talk about that and how you achieve that.
I couldn't even believe that. This
That's
was
part
even
of
possible.
The proactive approach, and this can kind of go into a couple different ways. But when we talk about the tenant screening in general, we're pretty strict with tenant screening, and we've also all seen what leads to an eviction and how to track that, and what are some of the red flags, as you will. If we're looking at a rental history report, we know what to look for at this point. So even as we're placing tenants, we're really, really confident in our ability to find the right person. And up until recently, we went a very, very long time with 0 evictions from anybody we placed. And I think since that record has been broken, we're still way below 1% of people that we put into the home. They never get evicted. They're the right fit. Their income qualifies, their credit qualifies. They've got great background with renting properties, no criminal background, no sexual offenders, nothing like that. All of that stuff is just, again, that proactive approach of just finding the right person and not just settling. And it's very, very detailed. And as an investor and as an owner, it can sometimes be frustrating because you'll see these applications come through, and it's just, if it's not the right person, it's not worth the risk. Sitting on the market for an extra 2 weeks is way, way easier to swallow than an eviction that can cost you months of rent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I was going to ask that too, is like, when you're picky, which you are, which is fine, because you're picky on behalf of investors, which is
Yep.
perfect. What are the implications then in terms of additional lease up times? I mean, obviously the less picky you are, you could just put a warm body in. I could rent a property tomorrow if I wanted to.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and that even goes with we alluded to like the market rent analysis earlier with Barbie as well, and where do we find that line between maximizing the rent that we can get and finding the right person and not being on the market for 2-3 months at a time.
Right.
And so those are all, again, kind of that proactive approach to leasing is having those honest conversations, being very transparent with the owners and the investors as well, and saying, hey, this is what has actually leased in the last 6 months around this area. It's not what's on the market right now. That stuff doesn't matter. If you go into Zillow and you look, well, this property is at 1,900, this property is at 2,000. Well, what's actually leased in the last 6 months has been going for 1,650, 1,700 for an example. So we try to look at the actual true data of what we think that this size of home in this area can get. And then from there, it's about being very kind of surgical about our approach to dropping the rent as well. That way, after a week of being on market, if we see some traction, things are going really well, it might just stay there. But if not, we're dropping it 1% every single week to make sure it stays at the top of syndication and it's actually getting a lot of eyes on it. So it just doesn't sit there stagnant. Watching these homes sit on the market for 3 months at a time and not having any sort of price reduction or any action at all feels really bad as an owner, and just think, we as Great Jones, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we're not getting paid unless we're collecting money for the owner. And so we are very aligned in our approach to, we want to make money as a company and we want our owners to make money as well. So we're trying to get somebody in there as fast as possible, the best tenant we can find for the most rent that we can possibly get. And I think we do a pretty darn good job at it. We're not perfect with it, but we feel pretty good about where we are right now.
So just to thin slice what you just said, you used the word benefits to syndication, and I just want to gain some clarity about that. What obviously fantastic for the owner when you can, you guys have your own software and you can automate all this stuff, and the rent drops a certain percentage every week so that it continues to obviously get more attention or get more potential applicants. But what did you mean by syndication? Is this like a search engine optimization play? Is that what you're getting at? A
little bit. What you'll find with a lot of the Zillow, all of the things that we push it out to about 51 different sites. And what will happen is every time that you take an action on a property, it will send an automated email to everybody that's either looked at the property. You can click the little heart, you can follow that property, and it'll just say, hey, this has been recently reduced. Are you still interested? And it sort of brings it back to the top of mind. It's like a marketing tactic, really, is what it is. And you'll also see it pop back up on the page as well as, recent activity, things like that show up. It's a little different for every single site that we syndicate to, but yeah, it's a little cheat code that we use just to try to keep it from getting buried by everything else.
Cool. So let's dive into probably the biggest negative for every investor, and stuff that in our history we've experienced a lot of pain with. And let's call it tenant turns, rehab and maintenance, whatever you want. Now, one of the things that we looked at that, like when Jack and I were basically prior to knowing you guys and while we were raking you over the coals behind the scenes, there were two things that we looked at that we kind of were scratching our heads going like, how the hell do they do this? So one of them was the eviction rate, which we already talked about. But the other one is that you actually have no markup on any contractor fees, which to me is like incredulous. Like, how do you do that and still make a living? Because it's been our experience, and we've been dealing across the board with a lot of local and regional companies, plus an attempt to partner with some other guys and run our own. And it's obviously it's a tough business, and the only way that we or any of them could make money doing this is by having some pretty significant markup in terms of contractor fees. Because let's face it, let's say you got a $750 a month rent on a C-class property. 10% of that for typical management fees is only $75. So I know that in all of our previous iterations, neither us nor our working partners could make $75 a month work. We just couldn't do it. It wasn't humanly possible. So how is it possible for you guys? How are you able to make this work?
So part of that is just the idea of scaling large enough to where that makes sense. And it's you're finding this balance of from a headcount perspective, from a resources perspective, just from a bandwidth perspective, how can we get the most out of our employees as well? And at a certain point, $75 for one property will eventually make sense. Now we're all looking at it right now. We're thinking, you know, how is that the only thing that we're collecting from this property? And it's sort of this, you know, future that we're looking at. And if we continue to be who we say we are, we're going to get there eventually to where all of those are going to make sense. But yeah, when I first joined as well, we all sat in this training group together and we started going over things that we're talking about right now. We're all scratching our heads like, everything that we've ever known about property management before, these companies are built off of these kind of nickel and diming fees. You know, if we send somebody out to inspect a leak, well, the property management company is going to take $30 right there. If we send somebody out to do an inspection, there's $30. If we send somebody out to do, you know, a vacancy check, there's $30 right there. And the fact that we don't do any of that stuff, it leaves all of our owners thinking, well, this is a no-brainer at this point, which is what we want. We want to be able to, you know, earn the right to manage that property. We want to. Again, we're aligned. We want the owners to make money so that, you know, further down the line, we look at this from a standpoint of if we can make this owner successful, they're probably going to invest in more properties. If they invest in more properties, they're going to bring them on to us. And it's just this cycle of, you know, it's kind of like just a referral program at this point. If we can make you guys happy, you're going to tell your friends about us. And that's the scalability of this to where at some point that 10% management fee is going to make a lot of sense when we're talking thousands and thousands of units in every single market that we're in.
So essentially, when you open up a market, from what I can gather, the amount of like employees that you have dedicated to that market, you have to be taking a loss on that market.
Yep.
So if you're investing into getting the infrastructure built and scaling it up to a point of which the number of units will make sense to be profitability for the company.
Absolutely.
And most property management companies, probably 99% of them, they wouldn't be able to stay in business long enough without marking up the rehabs, the tenant turns, the maintenance calls.
Everything,
And everything, right? So because of the way you guys are structured and funded, you have the ability to do that and stay in business, right?
Yeah.
Which is
and that's, you know, when all of this was being, and I'm sure Nicola and Chris talked about this a little bit as well, when all this was being thought of and put together, we just looked at this industry that, you know, we can all argue there's a lot of broken pieces to it. And one of the big pieces from an investor standpoint, you get really frustrated by maintenance costs and you get really frustrated with lack of communication. And we found that if we can nail those two things as a company, we win. And that's really as simple as that.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. Sorry, because I'm going to ask you this question anyway, Barbie. So the investor portal, like you talk about communication, and one of the things that we saw when we were looking to move all of our business over to you guys was and you guys have written your own software, so it's different, but you know, there's 3 or 4 main softwares out there that every property management company uses. You know, there's Appfolio, there's Buildium, whatever. There's only 3 or 4 main competitors out there, and they all have investor portals now that, in my opinion, on a good day are probably lame. They're just not very good, and they're not intuitive, and they make it really difficult for an investor to really gain any analysis of how their portfolio is performing, especially if they have anything more than 1 unit. And so I want to talk, Barbie, I want you to talk a little bit about what did you put into your investor portal, and you know, what are some of the things you're seeing as a result of being able to give the investor that analysis?
Yeah, so touching a little bit on the whole pricing structure and the non-markups. I mean, you know, we came into the industry wanting to be different and wanting to be better. So that meant doing things a new way that, you know, no one else has approached. So transparency being a big piece of that, and building trust and a true partnership with our owners. You know, instead of nickeling and diming, because everyone who's come up, you know, has come over to Great Jones has mainly come up because, to, you know, to Justin's point, the nickel and diming on the maintenance side, which is the, you know, the pricey side of the business. In order to do that, you have to be a more tech focused company so that you can provide those resources with, you know, a lesser amount of humans. So the portal, and, you know, we're building on it and you know, improving it constantly, but it is so that an owner has real-time data on their time. Like, I want to know what's going on with my property. I want to know if they've paid. I want to know if it's vacant or occupied. I want to know the answer to, you know, to this question about an invoice. When did I get paid? How much did I get paid? All of that information is available to them 24/7 in real time. So you don't have to call and sit on hold or call it, you know, speak to someone in general. You can go over those types of things on your own time. You know, a lot of investors have their own life or their own type of other, you know, set of business that they do in the day, and they rely on us heavily to manage their property, and they just want to kind of be in the know. So that portal for an owner is critical to just be real-time, live, up to date, without, you know, having to go through your typical prompts and emails and that kind of thing. That's been a huge resource. And like I said, it's evolving constantly. It wasn't what it is today when we started, but we take all of that feedback that we get from our owners and really use it towards how we create our website so that it's user-friendly and that it has all of the data that you would typically need to call someone for. It's available to you on the portal.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, it's kind of similar to what we talked about with tenant screening. I would imagine that also cuts down on the amount of humans that are necessary on your side to constantly answer questions with investors. Because I can tell you from personal experience, the portal's fantastic. Like, it really is easy to use, date ranges, you know, looking up invoices, like it's really laid out nice and clean. And, you know, even somebody that's not very technical can get on there, log on, and obviously you have team members that can show them how to use it too. You know, it's not like you're necessarily hanging them out to dry, but it's a really, really nice tool. And for us, though, you know, we've noticed in moving our investor base over to your system, the amount of questions that we get from investors, because sometimes if things aren't necessarily happening within the property management division as well as they should, or maybe they are well, but they're just not getting the information, the next layer would be to call us. Mm-hmm. And we've seen an absolute drastic reduction in the amount of questions and calls and complaints that we're getting from investors, especially the ones that are using the portal. It's like, oh my God, it's just like, I can see everything I need to see. I don't ever have to call or ask anybody. I'm getting what I want. So the beauty of that in my mind is that, you know, everybody's got a different idea of what passive investing is. And like you said, Barbie, like, well, these people have other day jobs and they're professionals, and not necessarily everyone is a full-time investor. There are full-time investors, and that's great, and they have that analysis too. But especially for the people that are busy with other things, this is a really fantastic piece of technology. So
our goal too is to minimize internally for our teams the amount of phone calls and outreach, you know, necessary, so that there is, just like the tenant portal, you know, they can go on their tenant portal and look at their balances and pay their rents or their outstanding maintenance cost, or create a work order, communicate with us, be updated about their work orders. Same concept there. You know, tech driven, makes everybody's life easier, gives you real-time data so you don't have to wait on anyone to give it to you, which I believe is a critical piece of time saver in today's world where everybody's so busy, you know, where I just need to get a lease real quick, tenant contact information, all of that is available all the time.
Yeah. So one more pain point I want to address is we're all investors, so we've all got the same issues, right? And what's the most important question that the investor asks? where the heck's my money?
Right.
Right. Like that's, I just want to get paid. Right. Like that's why everybody's in the game. Right. So you guys have done, I know you changed some schedule up a little bit recently too, but one of the things that we were also attracted to you with when we were looking at your system was the frequency in which you collect rents and how you pay them out. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so we pay our owners twice a month, in the middle, like the beginning, middle of the month, and the very last day of the month. And the reason for that is so you collect all of your money in that 1 month, but also to help the tenant out, because the cutoff period for us would be the 5th. You're late. We start producing late fees, sending out our rental demand payment letters. Everyone who's basically paid on time is what the owner gets on that first check cut. And then that very last one of the month allows that second opportunity for those stragglers, people who have paid late, or other types of funds coming in, to be released, so that you're not waiting month after month and money's like carrying over. You get all of your money in that 1 month.
Yeah, and this is fantastic because, pretty much any mom and pop or regional property management company is not going to have the resources to be able to do this. I mean, they're just not. I mean, you spoke very nicely about, some economies of scale, and I think you're in 12 or 13 markets now, something like that. Obviously with a goal to go fully national, but I know you're kicking butt in all these markets, and we're obviously predominantly in Indianapolis, and we've seen the benefits of it. And here, we just recently, there was another sort of ugly story that came out about another property management company that went under here this week, and it was just the same kind of thing. Like it was a privately held company, and certainly they had their real estate license. They were licensed. It wasn't an issue like that, but again, they were just operating in a more mom and pop way, and dealing internally with contractors and marking that up and whatever. But they were really running into problems with collections from tenants and things like that. But there were some shenanigans on the part of the owner, and eventually, got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and the whole thing came crumbling down. And then of course, the investors are left holding the bag. Like, where's the rents that have been collected the last couple of months, things like that. So what I love about you guys are doing is there's scale, and there's licensing, and there's systems, and escrows, and proper bank accounts, and everything is done so by the book and so systemized that there's really no risk of that happening. So I like that from a standpoint of when we work with you guys with our investors, we feel like we're putting our investors not just in the most profitable position, but in the safest position. And so we really appreciate that about you guys and what you've put together. Jack, do you have anything else that you want to, we covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything that I'm missing that you wanted to ask? Any burning questions?
Yeah, it's been very comprehensive. And I think one thing is, what do you guys see as the biggest challenges that you face in day-to-day operations? What does that look like for the two of you?
Yeah, for me, I'll go first. I would say easily the biggest challenge is we bring on a lot of, investors that might have one property here, and being able to sort of play the chameleon and adjust our systems and processes to that specific need of that owner who may only have one property. That's a big challenge, because, everybody comes in with a different set of expectations, and we're trying to fulfill those needs.
Right.
We could probably argue that it's a little bit easier to take on and manage a portfolio of 80 to 100 properties at a time, but that's not exactly where we are right now. We're taking on a lot of ones and twos, and that presents itself with a lot of communication challenges and a lot of challenges about setting and exceeding expectations.
Sure. Barbie?
I would agree 100%. Coming from the REIT world myself, where my portfolio of 3,000 homes was managed, I would say, compared to now, extremely easy, in the sense that when you control everything, you control your decisions, the cash flow, your process, it is a challenge. Like Justin said, you know, you work with different investors, different owners, different personalities, different expectations. You know, the portfolios are different, the product. So just maneuvering all day, you know, from one call to the next, to the one concern to the next, is being able to just keep an open mind and understanding every type of investor and their personal needs and being able to cater to that.
Yeah, awesome. Should I ask the famous question, Jack?
Let it rip.
Hey, all right, this is where you both get put on the spot. What is the question that we didn't ask that we should have asked? Now, that could also be like, what did we not bring up maybe that we should have brought up?
Yeah.
You know, it could be whatever you want.
Oh man, we're putting us right
Well,
on
you
the
may have
spot.
asked it in previously, I don't know. Let's see, a question you should ask, like what makes us different from other property
Well,
managers?
I think we covered a lot of that, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. That would be fantastic. Go for it.
So yeah, so I mean, that truly makes us different. I mean, really coming into it with a different vision, wanting to really focus on property management. It's been around for so many years. Everybody's just been kind of doing it the same. It's just kind of something you stumble upon in the real estate market. And you're like, hey, do you do property management? Sure, we have an arm of that, where we really wanted to make it our sole focus. That is the only thing that we do, and we want to do that one thing really well. And we do, you know, we're not 100% there, but we're really close, and we will be there soon, is being just 100% tech savvy and driven company, where, to your point, you know, we can provide owners with everything they need at their fingertips at any time of the day that they need it. And then just a really professional team that understands this industry and is just as invested as our clients and our partners, you know, to get it done. Being transparent, being honest, as you know, from our management agreements, we're pretty straightforward. There's no hidden language anywhere. Sometimes people read our agreement and go, really? And we want them to do that. You know, we're straight to the point. We want the partnership to be beneficial on both ends. And if it's not, then, you know, we don't want you to feel like it's going to cost you $1 million to make a change. And just, you know, promising and delivering on those promises.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think from our growth, the growth we've experienced, we're definitely accomplishing that. You know, we're honored to have relationships such as yours, and your trust that you bring on your investor partnerships to us, you know, is a tremendous. I mean, it says a lot about, you know, how you feel about us, and we appreciate that. And we want to move more in that direction. But, you know, we're not perfect, and we know that, but we strive every day, you know, to be that perfect provider.
Yeah, I think it's great. You know, you bring up something that was hugely important for us. Our history, as many of the listeners know, and people that are investors know, that we've worked with other versions of property management, including an attempt at some version of in-house as a turnkey company. And the most important thing I think you said today of any of it is we're doing one thing and we're doing it better than anybody else. Because it's been our experience that even with other good property managers that we've worked with, they're smaller, they're regional, right? They, for example, in Indianapolis, they know every street in Indianapolis, and that's great, but it's not their sole focus. They're also investors. They also have their real estate license. They're also peddling properties to investors, and that's kind of how they got into the property management game in the first place, right? So it was being able to take that, and I'm a huge appreciator of tech. I'm not necessarily the highest tech guy, but I appreciate what it can do. And to be able to say, look, specialize. And we're seeing this across all kinds of industries where strategic relationships, let the people who do what they do best just do that. You're even doing that within your organization. You have people that do nothing but onboarding, as an example. So to me, that is really the way business is going, and the way business is done, and the way businesses are going to continue to thrive as we get into this 2020, we're recording this at the end of 2019, but as we go 2020 and beyond, and we move into technology just accelerating faster and faster and faster, this is really what's going to make the difference, is the right relationships. Who's the best at doing anything? And when we looked at you guys, we said, these guys are by far and away, they're doing everything that we would have liked to have done, but never had the resources to do this on our own. So it's fantastic. Just absolutely love it. So anything you want to put on the tail end of that, Justin?
No, I like the segue of into 2020, because we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming. I think the question is kind of what's next, and the answer is you guys are going to be, as investors, as owners, very excited with where we're going. We spent all 2019 kind of building out our team, understanding who we are, and 2020 is all about executing that new strategy we have. So very cool stuff coming.
Awesome. Well, Jack, unless you got anything else, to me, that's a wrap.
I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Justin, we don't get to talk to you very often, so thank you for coming. And Barbie, we're excited that we get to interface with you almost on a daily basis. You're a pleasure to work with, and we really, really appreciate you guys and everything you're doing over there. And not just what you're doing for us, but mostly what you're doing for our investors, because it's the feedback we're getting is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
So
the level of professionalism that you guys have is unparalleled from anything that we've ever experienced before. So it has just been a true privilege to have you guys as partners. And I feel our investors are in very good hands.
Thank you. The same, thank you for trusting in us and partnering with us and sharing not only your portfolio, but your relationships as well. It means a lot to us as well.
Awesome. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you, listeners. This has been really, really fun. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.